In a crowded terminal, a black passenger endures a degrading moment when simple service is callously denied, exposing the raw edge of racial bias. Every dismissive glance and harsh word strips away his dignity, marking him with a public humiliation that resonates with every observer. Witness how this moment of profound disgrace ignites a quest for justice, setting him on a transformative journey that challenges deep-seated prejudices. What happened next shocked everyone and set off a chain of events no one saw coming. Stay with me, this is a story you need to hear. Before we start the story, comment below and let us know where in the world you're watching from today. And if you find this story impactful, don't forget to subscribe for more. The sun had barely risen when the airport began its daily symphony of motion and sound. Early morning light filtered through expansive glass walls, scattering warm hues across polished floors and vibrant digital displays. The steady hum of announcements, punctuated by the occasional burst of laughter and hurried footsteps, set a rhythmic pulse for a day full of hope, anxiety, and hidden stories. In this bustling terminal, every face told a tale, and every corner held whispers of change waiting to unfold. Marcus stepped through the sliding doors with quiet determination. His eyes, dark and thoughtful, took in the organized chaos of travelers hustling to their gates. Though his suit was simple and his briefcase showed signs of wear, there was an unmistakable dignity in the way he carried himself, as if every step was measured against a lifetime of lessons learned in silence. The scent of his cologne, subtle yet refined, mingled with the aroma of fresh coffee and the lingering smell of baked pastries from a nearby cafe, creating a sensory tapestry that marked his passage through this vibrant crossroads of lives. Not far from where Marcus stood, Amelia moved with a deliberate grace, her presence both commanding and gentle. Dressed in the crisp, blue uniform of a seasoned flight attendant, she exuded an air of professionalism that belied the turbulent emotions simmering beneath. Her eyes, a clear shade of green, surveyed the terminal with practiced precision. Every smile she offered to a traveler, every courteous nod, was a carefully choreographed performance meant to reassure and guide. Yet beneath that polished exterior lay a heart burdened by expectations and a personal history that had molded her in ways she rarely acknowledged. Amelia's day had begun much like any other, with the routine that had become as ingrained as the uniform she wore. Years of service had taught her the importance of efficiency, yet also the weight of responsibility. Each interaction, each decision, held consequences far beyond the fleeting moments of a boarding call. Though she prided herself on professionalism, the subtle pressures of her past and the echo of voices from a childhood filled with whispered prejudices occasionally stirred unease within her. As she moved among passengers, her mind would sometimes drift back to memories of her own struggles with identity and belonging, reflections that left her both empathetic and, at times, uncertain of where her true loyalties lay. It was during one of these reflective moments that Amelia encountered Marcus. The two met almost by accident, a collision of paths near a waiting lounge where tired travelers sought a moment of respite. Marcus had settled into a seat by a window, his gaze fixed on the planes taking off and landing, lost in thoughts that seemed as weighty as the baggage he carried. His calm exterior masked a storm of emotions, years of quiet endurance in the face of subtle injustices, the constant need to prove his worth in a world quick to judge by appearances. In his silence lay a determination born from hardship and a quiet rebellion against a system that had, for too long, ignored the true measure of a man. Amelia's eyes fell on Marcus as she approached with a warm smile meant to welcome him aboard his upcoming flight. In that brief moment, their worlds, so different yet inexplicably intertwined, brushed against each other. Her voice was gentle but measured when she offered him assistance. "Sir, may I help you with your boarding pass?" she asked, her tone carrying both the practiced ease of a seasoned professional and the faint tremor of uncertainty that often accompanied encounters that challenged one's preconceptions. Marcus looked up, and for a heartbeat, the busy terminal seemed to quiet around them. His voice, soft yet steady, replied, "I believe I have it right here, thank you." His eyes, a mix of reserve and quiet strength, held hers in a silent exchange that hinted at deeper stories. There was no anger in his expression, only a weary acceptance of the small indignities that life had repeatedly offered him. Yet behind that calm, a spark of something unspoken, perhaps defiance, perhaps hope, glimmered briefly. In the background, other passengers watched with a mixture of curiosity and empathy. Among them was Sophie, a fellow flight attendant who had shared many of Amelia's long hours and secret doubts. Sophie's gentle smile and kind eyes often provided a silent counterbalance to the rigidity of airport routines. She observed the encounter from a distance, her mind quietly noting the tension that always seemed to hang in the air when differences met under the guise of routine interactions. Sophie knew all too well the silent battles waged every day, the clash between duty and personal belief, between following orders and listening to one's conscience. As the minutes passed, the ambient noise of the terminal grew louder, a reminder of the ceaseless churn of life outside individual moments. The scent of roasted coffee beans, mingled with the crisp tang of disinfectant, seemed to underscore the fragility of human interactions in such a transient space. Amelia moved on to assist another passenger, but a subtle shift in her demeanor remained, a lingering question that tugged at the edges of her thoughts. Was it possible that behind Marcus's quiet exterior lay a story of triumph over the injustices he had endured? And if so, what had his journey cost him, and what might it demand in return? The themes of injustice and empathy had long been woven into the fabric of the terminal's daily life. Every delayed flight, every missed connection, carried with it a quiet reminder of life's unfairness. Yet within that same environment, there was also a promise of personal growth, a chance for every individual to confront their own biases and, in doing so, find redemption in understanding. For Amelia, the encounter with Marcus was an unspoken challenge, a call to examine the reasons behind her actions, even if she had never truly intended to harm anyone. The memory of a childhood where prejudice had been an ever-present shadow, combined with the stern lessons of an unforgiving society, left her wrestling with conflicting emotions. As the day unfolded, Amelia's routine continued. She moved through the terminal, her interactions with passengers a delicate dance between duty and the unspoken awareness that every decision, no matter how small, carried weight. At one point, while refilling a cart with refreshments, she overheard snippets of conversation among a group of travelers discussing the recent news about service discrepancies and the subtle injustices that still plagued modern society. Their words, laced with frustration and hope, resonated deeply with her. It was as if the air itself was charged with the collective yearning for a world where respect and fairness were not luxuries, but given rights. Meanwhile, Marcus lingered at his seat, his mind a canvas of memories and reflections. He recalled a time when his family had been forced to hide the truth of their heritage, the reason why he now traveled in anonymity. The scars of that past were invisible to the casual observer, yet they had shaped every choice he made. There was a time when the promise of a bright future had been clouded by prejudice, when simple acts of kindness were met with suspicion. And so he had learned to navigate the world with quiet resilience, his inner life a tapestry of hopes and disappointments. Yet beneath his calm exterior, there was a resolve that would soon prove to be more powerful than anyone could have imagined. In that charged atmosphere, subtle hints of a coming storm began to take shape. A minor misunderstanding at a check-in counter, a raised voice that was quickly hushed by a sympathetic colleague, and a fleeting look exchanged between two strangers all contributed to an undercurrent of tension. It was as if the airport itself sensed that a significant moment was on the horizon, one that would challenge long-held assumptions and force every individual present to confront the true nature of justice and compassion. Amelia, too, sensed the impending change. As she walked the polished corridors, memories of past incidents, each a small reminder of the power of words and actions, flashed through her mind. She remembered a time when a kind word had diffused a heated argument, and another when a harsh command had deepened a wound that might never heal. Each memory was a silent testament to the fact that in a world full of rapid transitions, the smallest acts of empathy or cruelty could alter the course of life forever. Her thoughts were interrupted when a new announcement crackled over the speakers, urging passengers to prepare for boarding. The familiar chime of the call reminded everyone that time was both relentless and impartial, urging them onward regardless of the unresolved tensions that lay behind them. As Marcus gathered his belongings and rose from his seat, the moment seemed to stretch into a quiet pause, a breath held in the midst of chaos. There was a vulnerability in that act, a willingness to face another day despite the silent struggles that marked his every journey. Even as Marcus moved toward his gate, his eyes met Amelia's across the crowded terminal. In that fleeting glance, a myriad of unspoken words passed between them, a mix of apology, regret, and the shared burden of knowing that the day held both promise and peril. It was a moment that neither would fully understand until much later, when the consequences of their meeting rippled outward into a story that none could have foreseen. The terminal, with all its fleeting moments and permanent scars, became a microcosm of the world beyond its walls. Here, every announcement, every hurried step, and every whispered conversation was a reminder that life was a tapestry of interwoven stories, each one delicate, each one profound. In this setting, the themes of injustice and empathy were not abstract ideas, but living, breathing realities that touched every soul passing through. And in the silent spaces between the noise and the rush, the seeds of personal growth were being sown, even as old wounds waited for the light of truth to heal them. As the boarding call echoed through the hall, Amelia's heart pounded with a mixture of duty and dread. She knew that soon she would have to face decisions that might challenge everything she had ever believed. And though she tried to maintain the calm professionalism required of her role, deep down she wondered if this day might be the turning point, a moment when the boundaries between right and wrong, duty and prejudice, would blur into a single, irreversible act. Marcus, on the other hand, felt a quiet anticipation mixed with a sense of resolve. Every step toward the gate was a step toward a future he had long tried to keep hidden, a future that held secrets as vast and unpredictable as the sky itself. In his mind, echoes of his past mingled with visions of what might be, each thought a reminder that sometimes the most ordinary journeys could lead to the most extraordinary revelations. In that fleeting morning light, the stage was set for a drama that would challenge the very essence of identity and justice. The bustling terminal, with its symphony of sounds and vibrant colors, bore witness to the quiet collision of two lives, each carrying its own burdens, each unaware that their paths were destined to converge in a way that would forever alter the course of their lives. The air was heavy with anticipation, every whispered promise of change suspended in the soft glow of dawn, as if the universe itself held its breath for what was to come. As the passengers began to settle into their seats on the waiting planes, and the routine of travel resumed its steady pace, neither Marcus nor Amelia could have predicted that their simple encounter would become the spark for a revelation so profound it would shake the foundations of their world. The hidden truths, buried beneath layers of prejudice and silence, were slowly stirring, ready to emerge and demand justice in a language that no one could ignore. In that quiet, charged moment, the story of a denied service, an unspoken prejudice, and the promise of redemption began its slow, inevitable march toward a destiny that would force every heart present to confront the true cost of injustice and the healing power of empathy. The morning's light had deepened into a steady glow as the airport's corridors filled with travelers eager to embark on new journeys. The buzz of hurried footsteps and muffled conversations created a constant backdrop of life, one that belied the undercurrent of tension slowly building beneath the surface. Marcus walked with quiet determination toward his assigned departure gate, his mind a mixture of guarded hope and wary anticipation. Though he appeared calm and composed, every step he took was laden with memories of past indignities, a series of small, persistent injustices that had chipped away at his spirit over the years. Today, however, something in the air felt different. It was as if the universe had aligned in a way that hinted at the arrival of both reckoning and revelation. Amelia, meanwhile, was busy at work in the nearby service area. After her earlier encounter with Marcus, she couldn't shake the uneasy feeling that had crept into her thoughts. Her polished blue uniform, a symbol of her commitment and professionalism, now felt like both armor and shackle. With each passing moment as she greeted and assisted passengers, a quiet internal dialogue churned, a debate between duty and the weight of her own hidden prejudices. She recalled the lingering echo of childhood lessons, the whispers of what she'd been taught about appearances and worth, and wondered if those old ghosts might yet demand their due. At the departure gate, a subtle drama began to unfold. The gate area was a microcosm of the larger world, a place where personal histories converged and clashed, and where every interaction carried the potential for both kindness and cruelty. Marcus had settled into a seat near the window, his eyes drifting over the line of planes taxiing on the tarmac. His gaze occasionally met that of other passengers, and in those fleeting moments, a silent story was exchanged, one of resilience, caution, and the quiet hope for dignity. It wasn't long before murmurs of discontent started to ripple through the waiting crowd. A group of passengers, their faces marked by fatigue and frustration from delays, began to complain about the service they were receiving. Their voices, low at first, soon rose in volume, carrying accusations that seemed both personal and systemic. One man, his tone sharp with irritation, voiced a concern that struck an unintentional nerve. "Why should we always wait while some folks get special treatment? Doesn't everyone deserve the same care?" His words, though meant to express exasperation with the system, carried an undercurrent that made some eyes narrow and hearts quicken. Marcus, who had been quietly listening, felt the weight of those words as if they were directed straight at him. He remembered too well the sting of being overlooked, the prejudice that lurked behind polite smiles. His hands, resting on his lap, clenched slightly as the murmurs grew. He wasn't one to be easily provoked, yet the accumulation of subtle slights over time had prepared him for moments just like this, a moment when every hidden hurt threatened to burst forth. Amelia, ever the consummate professional, tried to defuse the rising tension with calm efficiency. She moved from group to group, offering reassurances and smiles that, to an outsider, would have seemed genuine. Yet inside her, the conflict deepened. In a quiet exchange with a fellow flight attendant, Sophie, she admitted in a hushed tone, "I feel like every step I take today is shadowed by something I can't quite name. There's a tension in the air, and it's not just about delayed flights." Sophie, with her gentle eyes and empathetic smile, simply nodded. "Sometimes it's the quiet voices of the past coming back to remind us who we really are," she replied, her words both soothing and laden with meaning. As the boarding call for Marcus's flight echoed softly over the intercom, a sudden shift in the atmosphere swept over the gate. A supervisor, whose face was set in a mask of professional severity, approached Amelia with an urgent, almost accusatory tone. "Amelia, there have been complaints, from a few passengers regarding how you handled the service for one of our travelers. They felt that you denied him basic assistance when he needed it." The words struck Amelia like a cold splash of water. In that moment, she recalled the brief encounter with Marcus earlier, a moment she had tried to navigate with both grace and distance. Yet now, under the scrutiny of an authority figure and the accusatory glances of nearby passengers, every choice she made seemed to hang in the balance. Amelia's heart pounded as she tried to explain. "I followed the protocol as always," she murmured, her voice wavering between indignation and regret. "I offered help as soon as I noticed his discomfort. I don't understand how this could be seen as denial." The supervisor's eyes narrowed, and the conversation drew unwanted attention. A murmur of dissent rippled through the gathered crowd, intensifying the charged mood. Marcus, having overheard the exchange, felt a surge of conflicting emotions. The memory of his previous encounters, the dismissals, the subtle snubs, the quiet humiliation, flashed vividly before his eyes. Yet there was also a spark inside him, a quiet flame of resolve that refused to be extinguished by mere misunderstanding. "I only asked politely for assistance," he thought, recalling the gentle yet firm tone he had used when speaking to Amelia earlier. His mind raced with questions. Was the service denial a matter of miscommunication, or was it something deeper, a reflection of biases that lurked beneath the surface? In the midst of this unfolding drama, the flight began its boarding process. Passengers shuffled toward the aircraft, leaving behind the charged atmosphere of the gate. But for Marcus and Amelia, the tension lingered, a silent promise that the events of this day were far from over. Once aboard, the aircraft's narrow aisles and confined space would amplify every emotion, every whispered word, and every unspoken accusation. On the plane, as passengers settled into their seats and the engines roared to life, the tension morphed into an almost palpable energy. Marcus found his seat near the center of the cabin, close enough to observe the interactions between the flight crew and the passengers. Across the aisle, Amelia moved methodically, her smile strained as she distributed safety instructions and answered questions. Every now and then, their eyes would meet, brief flashes of recognition that carried both the warmth of shared humanity and the weight of unspoken grievances. During the flight, minor setbacks began to accumulate like raindrops in a storm. A misplaced bag here, a misunderstood instruction there, each incident adding to the growing pile of discontent. In one instance, an elderly passenger, trembling with a mixture of fear and frustration, approached Amelia again. "I need my water, please," she said, her voice cracking. But in the flurry of activity, Amelia's response was curt, a momentary lapse in the carefully maintained rhythm of service. The passenger's eyes filled with tears as she retreated, leaving a trail of discomfort that spread quietly through the cabin. Marcus watched all of this with a growing sense of empathy and sorrow. Every small injustice played out in that confined space resonated with the echoes of larger, more systemic wrongs. In a hushed conversation with the man seated beside him, Marcus explained softly, "I've seen this before, how easily a kind gesture can be marred by misunderstanding or prejudice. It hurts to see someone treated so harshly just because of who they are." The man nodded in agreement, his own eyes reflecting a lifetime of disappointments. The conversation, though quiet, was charged with the shared recognition of a world that often failed to live up to its promises. As the flight continued, subtle but persistent clues began to hint at a reality far more complex than anyone had yet imagined. In the brief interactions between Amelia and her colleagues, and in the discreet glances exchanged between passengers, there were hints of a secret, an undercurrent of destiny that seemed to swirl around Marcus like a quiet storm. A young passenger, overhearing a fragment of conversation between two airport staff members, remarked in a low voice, "Did you hear? They say that sometimes the one who appears most ordinary holds a secret that can change everything." His words, half joking yet laced with sincerity, seemed to hang in the recycled air of the cabin. Amelia, too, found herself haunted by these murmurs. Every time her eyes met Marcus's, a silent question passed between them, a question about identity, worth, and the power of hidden truths. Later, when the cabin lights dimmed for a brief moment of in-flight rest, she retreated to the small service area at the back of the plane. There, in the solitude of a narrow corridor, she allowed herself a moment of introspection. "What is it about him?" she wondered aloud, her voice a mere whisper. "Why does his presence feel both comforting and challenging, as if he is meant to shake the foundations of everything I believe in?" Her internal musings were interrupted only by the soft beeping of the overhead monitors and the distant hum of the engines, a reminder that the journey was far from over. The hours on the flight stretched into a test of endurance, not just of physical travel, but of emotional resilience. Every interaction, every exchange of words, built layers upon the already intricate web of conflict. In one particularly tense moment, a conversation erupted near the galley. A middle-aged businessman, his face flushed with indignation, confronted a younger crew member about the pace of service. "I expect better," he declared, his tone rising in anger. "This is not how a first-class airline treats its passengers." The argument, though quickly quelled by a calm yet firm intervention from a senior staff member, left an indelible mark on the atmosphere. It was a stark reminder that the day's events were cascading into a maelstrom of misunderstandings and unaddressed grievances. Throughout these mounting challenges, Marcus remained a quiet observer, sometimes a participant in the unfolding drama, sometimes a solitary figure lost in reflection. He exchanged few words, but his eyes said more than any speech could. They flickered with the light of remembered pain and the promise of hidden strength. In one hushed exchange with a fellow traveler, he confided, "Sometimes I feel that life is a series of doors, some open easily, while others are locked tight by forces we can't see. I'm just waiting for the right key." His words, though simple, carried the weight of a destiny that he himself barely understood. It was as if every setback he had endured was preparing him for something monumental, a moment when all the pieces of his life would finally come together. As the aircraft soared above the patchwork of clouds and distant cities, the cabin transformed into a microcosm of the world's complexities. The space was charged with the energy of human stories, stories of struggle, resilience, and the perpetual quest for dignity. Amelia, caught between her duty and her growing inner conflict, found her thoughts drifting back to that first encounter with Marcus. Was it possible that in the quiet determination of his eyes lay the key to a future where prejudice no longer held sway? Or was it merely the reflection of a soul battered by too many injustices, longing for the recognition it deserved? The flight took on a life of its own as more minor incidents compounded the tension. A spilled drink here, a missed greeting there, each event, trivial on its own, contributed to a mounting sense of disquiet. At one point, a flight attendant apologized profusely to a passenger who had been inadvertently overlooked during the service round. The passenger's disappointed sigh, heavy with the resignation of repeated neglect, echoed through the narrow aisle and reverberated in the minds of those who had witnessed it. Even the hum of the engines seemed to underscore the fragility of human connection in a world where every slight was amplified by history and memory. In a quiet corner of the cabin, Amelia found herself engaged in a soft but intense conversation with Sophie. "I keep thinking about Marcus," she confessed, her voice barely rising above the ambient noise. There's something in his eyes, a quiet strength mixed with sorrow, that makes me wonder if I've been too quick to judge. But then I also feel the pull of old habits, the way my past has shaped my reactions. Sophie reached out and gently squeezed her hand. Sometimes our past can blind us to the truth of who someone really is, she said, her tone laden with empathy. Maybe it's time to listen not just to what we see on the surface, but to the deeper story each person carries. Their conversation was interrupted by a sudden call from the cockpit, an announcement that the flight would experience a brief delay in its descent due to air traffic. The message, though routine in its wording, added another layer of uncertainty. In that moment, as passengers exchanged anxious glances and murmurs filled the air, Marcus felt a stirring within him, a realization that every delay, every hardship, might be part of a larger tapestry that he was only beginning to unravel. By the time the plane began its descent toward the destination airport, the atmosphere inside the cabin had grown palpably charged. The earlier grievances, the whispered suspicions, and the unspoken questions had all coalesced into an almost tangible tension. Marcus sat by the window, watching the landscape below shift from sprawling urbanity to clusters of houses and winding roads. His mind was a storm of memories and possibilities, each thought intertwining with the next. He recalled fragments of conversations he'd overheard, snatches of talk about fortunes lost and found, of secrets hidden behind ordinary faces, and wondered if his own life might someday be revealed as something more than the sum of its quiet struggles. Amelia moved down the aisle one last time before the final landing procedures began. Every interaction, every apologetic smile, now carried a weight that went beyond mere customer service. She knew that the day's events had exposed something raw and unresolved, a clash between duty and conscience that could no longer be ignored. As she prepared to disembark, she caught sight of Marcus once more. Their eyes met in a long, lingering look that spoke of shared pain and a silent promise of change. In that gaze, both understood that the journey was far from over. The events of this flight had set in motion a chain reaction that would soon alter the lives of everyone involved. When the plane finally touched down and the passengers began to disembark into the cool evening air, the lingering tension of the journey clung to them like a second skin. Outside, under the glow of airport lights and the cool brush of a gentle night breeze, Marcus stepped off the plane with a quiet resolve. He moved slowly, almost deliberately, as if each step carried him closer, not just to his destination, but to an understanding of his own worth. In his heart, a subtle but powerful force was awakening. A force that hinted at secrets long buried, and a destiny that might, in time, transform the very fabric of his existence. Back inside the terminal, as Amelia and Sophie rejoined the throng of airport staff, a profound sense of introspection settled over them both. Amelia's mind replayed every moment of the flight, the hesitations, the sharp words, and the unspoken exchanges that had left an indelible mark on her soul. "I wonder," she murmured quietly to Sophie as they walked through the now quieter corridors, "if everything that happened today was meant to show me something about who I am, and who I might become if I let go of these old fears." Sophie's reply was soft, yet firm. Sometimes it takes a confrontation with our deepest vulnerabilities to unlock a hidden strength. You have that strength, Amelia. Don't let the past hold you back from what you're truly capable of. As they spoke, the murmur of the crowd around them faded into the background, replaced by the steady rhythm of footsteps and the distant sound of rolling luggage. Outside the terminal, the night had fully descended, cloaking the airport in a veil of reflective quiet. It was in these hushed moments that the seeds of future transformation took root, seeds that promised to blossom into a revelation so profound that it would redefine every life touched by today's events. Marcus, now alone under the soft glow of a street lamp, paused to take a deep breath. The cool night air filled his lungs, and with it, a quiet determination began to kindle within him. He remembered the words of a stranger from earlier, a fleeting comment about hidden fortunes and unexpected legacies. Though it had seemed like idle talk at the time, those words now echoed in his mind, stirring a long-dormant curiosity about his own past. Could it be that the small, quiet man who had borne the weight of subtle injustices all these years was destined for something far greater? The thought was both thrilling and terrifying. In the days that followed, the airport continued its relentless pace, yet the events of that fateful flight remained etched in the memories of those who had experienced them. Rumors began to circulate, whispers among travelers and staff alike, that the incident was more than just a minor misunderstanding. Some speculated that Marcus, the quiet passenger with a haunted gaze, was not merely a victim of circumstance, but perhaps someone whose life held secrets beyond ordinary comprehension. Others, more skeptical, chalked it up to the heightened emotions of a long day. But for those who had witnessed the charge exchanges, there was an undeniable sense that the truth lay hidden beneath layers of everyday routine. Amelia found herself grappling with the aftermath of a confrontation. At work the next day, as she meticulously checked passenger details and coordinated with her colleagues, her mind repeatedly drifted back to the flight. Every interaction on the plane had been a thread in a tapestry of conflict and compassion, and now, in the quiet moments between tasks, she felt the pull of a lesson she could no longer ignore. "We are all connected by the choices we make," she whispered to herself, her eyes soft with remorse and newfound resolve. Sometimes a single act of kindness, or its absence, can change the course of someone's life. Her thoughts were interrupted when Sophie approached, a look of quiet concern on her face. "Amelia," she said gently, "I've been thinking about what happened. Maybe it's time we both take a closer look at our own actions. Not to dwell on mistakes, but to learn from them." Amelia nodded slowly, the weight of the past mixing with a cautious optimism for the future. In that moment, she realized that the conflict of the previous day was not just about a service denial, it was about a broader struggle for understanding, for empathy, and for the courage to change. Meanwhile, Marcus began to notice subtle shifts in the way people treated him. At the check-in desk, a clerk, who had once seemed indifferent now, offered him a warm smile. In the crowded terminal, a few passengers, perhaps moved by the quiet dignity in his eyes, nodded in acknowledgement as he passed by. It was as if the events on the flight had begun to ripple outward, altering perceptions in ways that Marcus had never thought possible. Yet even as small gestures of kindness emerged, there remained a lingering sense of injustice, a reminder that the battle against prejudice was far from over. Late one evening, as Marcus sat alone in a quiet corner of a modest hotel lobby near the airport, he unfolded a faded photograph from his wallet. The image, a sepia-toned portrait of a smiling family, was a relic of a past he rarely spoke of, a past shrouded in secrecy and loss. As he traced the lines of familiar faces with his fingertip, he wondered about the legacy that had been thrust upon him without his consent. For years, he had carried the weight of unspoken expectations, of a heritage that seemed to belong to someone else entirely. And now, in the midst of everyday struggles and rising tensions, those hidden truths began to stir, hinting at a destiny that defied the narrow confines of the present. In the days that followed, as the airport's rhythm resumed its familiar cadence, the tension that had characterized that singular flight began to take on new forms. Discussions about the incident became more frequent, not just among passengers, but also in hushed conversations among staff, and even in the quiet corridors of management offices. Rumors swirled about the identity of the man who had so silently endured his treatment, and about the possible consequences for those who had failed him. Amidst the speculation, Marcus's quiet demeanor became a subject of both admiration and envy. Some saw him as a symbol of resilience, a quiet hero who had borne the brunt of systemic injustice with grace. Others, however, whispered of a fortune hidden behind those unassuming eyes, a legacy that, if revealed, could upend the very structures of power and prejudice that had long dictated the terms of service. Every small setback during that turbulent period felt like a piece of a larger puzzle, a puzzle whose final image was obscured by shadows of uncertainty and old wounds. Amelia struggled to reconcile her professional responsibilities with the newfound awareness of her own limitations. In moments of solitude, she would recall the sharp sting of the supervisor's rebuke, the disapproving glances of onlookers, and the quiet, almost imperceptible shift in Marcus's expression when their eyes met. Each memory was a reminder that the choices she made in those fleeting moments carried consequences far beyond a single flight. They were echoes of a society still grappling with the complexities of identity, power, and the right to be treated with dignity. As the tension mounted, unexpected opportunities for dialogue began to emerge. A chance encounter in a quiet airport cafe led to a long, unplanned conversation between two strangers, a retired teacher and a young entrepreneur, about the nature of respect, the scars left by discrimination, and the possibility of transformation when one is willing to confront their own biases. Their words, measured and sincere, found their way into the collective consciousness of the waiting travelers, reinforcing the notion that every action, every decision, had the power to either perpetuate injustice or sow the seeds of change. One evening, as a cool rain began to fall outside, Amelia found herself lingering by a large window that overlooked the runway. The raindrops danced in the glow of neon lights, creating a mesmerizing interplay of reflections and shadows. In that quiet moment, the tumult of the past days receded into a reflective silence. She thought about Marcus, the silent strength, the unspoken pain, and the hints of something greater hidden just beneath the surface. Perhaps, she mused softly, this is not just about a single moment of denial, but about a lifetime of overlooked beauty and potential. Her heart ached with both regret and hope, as if she were finally beginning to understand that every mistake carried the possibility of redemption. Meanwhile, Marcus's inner journey had taken him to a point of quiet reckoning. Late at night, in the solitude of his modest room, he pored over old letters and documents that had been carefully tucked away, tokens of a legacy he had never fully comprehended. There were hints of family ties, whispers of fortunes amassed and lost, and a recurring name that seemed to pulse like a heartbeat throughout his history. The more he read, the more he sensed that his life was not an accident, but a carefully written story waiting for its climax. The quiet determination in his eyes now burned with a renewed intensity, as if the very act of discovery was fanning the embers of a future that he could no longer ignore. In hushed conversations with trusted acquaintances, a longtime friend from a community center, a neighbor who had witnessed his quiet dignity, Marcus began to piece together the fragments of his past. Each revelation was both painful and empowering, a reminder that sometimes the most extraordinary truths are hidden behind the mask of everyday life. And as the days turned into weeks, the quiet murmur of a coming storm grew louder, hinting at a dramatic shift that would force everyone to confront the consequences of their actions. Back at the airport, as the routine of departures and arrivals resumed with mechanical precision, Amelia and Sophie found themselves at the heart of an unexpected investigation. A higher-up from the airline had taken notice of the growing whispers and had begun to review the incident with a discerning eye. In a quiet meeting held in a small, windowless room behind the terminal, questions were raised about the procedures that had led to the incident on the flight. "We need to ensure that every passenger is treated with the utmost respect," one manager stated firmly, his voice echoing in the cramped space. "If there are lapses in service that stem from personal bias, then we must address them immediately." The conversation was laced with both frustration and resolve, a clear indication that the incident was not an isolated case, but part of a broader pattern that needed rectification. Amelia listened intently, feeling the weight of responsibility pressed down on her shoulders. She knew that the investigation could have far-reaching consequences, not only for her career, but for the entire way the airline approached service and customer care. In that moment, the rising conflict in the corridors of the terminal merged with her personal struggle, creating a tangled web of emotion and duty that she could no longer untangle by herself. As the investigation continued behind the scenes, subtle gestures of solidarity began to emerge among the staff. Colleagues who had once maintained a safe distance now whispered words of encouragement to one another, as if the events had awakened a shared understanding of the need for change. Sophie, ever the compassionate mediator, organized small gatherings after shifts where the team could talk openly about their experiences, stories of past mistakes, hopes for a better future, and a commitment to confronting the biases that had long been tolerated. In these quiet moments, the seeds of transformation were sown, nurtured by the belief that every challenge was also an opportunity to learn, to grow, and to ultimately redeem oneself. In the midst of these shifting dynamics, Marcus continued his quiet exploration of his own identity. Every new discovery about his family's past, every forgotten memory unearthed from dusty documents, added layers of complexity to the man he had long thought he was. He realized that the hardships he had endured were not merely random misfortunes, but part of a larger tapestry woven with threads of destiny, sacrifice, and hidden fortune. The more he learned, the more he understood that his life might be on the cusp of an extraordinary transformation, one that would not only redefine his own existence, but also challenge the preconceived notions held by everyone around him. Night after night, as the airport slowly quieted and the rush of the day gave way to introspection, the subtle foreshadowing of that dramatic twist grew ever stronger. Whispers in quiet corridors spoke of a secret that had been guarded for generations, a secret that promised to upend the established order and reveal truths too long hidden behind the veil of ordinary life. And as the pieces of Marcus's past began to fall into place, a sense of inevitability crept over him. He sensed that the moment of reckoning was near, a moment when the legacy of his family would come crashing into the present, forcing everyone to confront the reality of what had been denied and what could finally be claimed. In the final hours before the next flight's departure, as the terminal buzzed with renewed energy and the promise of change, Amelia found herself once again face to face with Marcus. Their eyes met in a quiet hallway between the boarding gates, a silent conversation unfolding in the depths of their gaze. There was a shared understanding, a recognition that what had transpired was only the beginning of a larger, more complex story. Without a word, Marcus offered a slight, knowing smile that conveyed both gratitude and an unspoken challenge. Amelia, caught between regret and the stirring of newfound resolve, returned the smile with a softness that hinted at change. In that fleeting moment, amid the ever-present hum of the airport and the anticipation of journeys yet to come, both understood that the rising tension was not just a conflict. It was the catalyst for a transformation that would forever alter their lives. As the crowd began to thin and the day's final announcements echoed softly in the background, the once overlooked moments of injustice and compassion had converged into a single, undeniable truth. Every misstep, every whispered accusation, and every quiet act of empathy had built towards a crescendo, a climax that would soon reveal the extraordinary reality hidden beneath years of quiet endurance. And though the full implications of that revelation remained shrouded in uncertainty, one thing was clear. The journey toward understanding, respect, and personal growth had only just begun. In the quiet that followed, with the terminal bathed in the soft glow of closing time and the memories of the day lingering like shadows on the walls, a promise was made. A promise that every action, every moment of kindness or cruelty would contribute to a larger story, a story in which even the most unassuming passenger could hold the key to a legacy that transcended prejudice and redefined the very nature of fortune. And as the night settled over the airport, the whispers of change grew louder, hinting at a future where truth, once hidden, would finally emerge in all its transformative power. The day broke with a heavy stillness that seemed to press upon every heart at the airport. In a quiet, reserved conference room tucked away from the usual bustle, a small group of airline managers, supervisors, and staff gathered to discuss the events of the previous day. The fluorescent lights hummed overhead as tension mixed with anticipation. Amelia sat near the head of the table, her blue uniform now feeling less like a symbol of pride and more like a constant reminder of a mistake she could not undo. Across from her, Marcus remained silent, his calm eyes hiding a turmoil that had deepened since the confrontation on the flight. His presence, quiet and unassuming as always, lent an unexpected gravity to the gathering. Mr. Harris, a stern-faced manager known for his uncompromising adherence to protocol, opened the meeting. His voice was measured but carried an edge of reproach as he addressed the group. "We have received several complaints regarding the service provided on Flight 472. There are serious concerns about how one of our passengers was treated," he said, his gaze shifting between Amelia and the others. "We need a full explanation. This is not just about following procedures. It's about upholding the dignity of every person who trusts us with their journey." Amelia's hands trembled slightly as she clutched a folded napkin, her eyes darting from Mr. Harris to the other faces in the room. She tried to steady her breathing, recalling the confusion and pressure of that day. "I followed the guidelines," she began softly, her voice thick with regret, "but perhaps I was too quick to act. I didn't mean to cause harm." Her words faltered, laden with an unspoken apology that seemed too small to mend the rift already forming. Before the conversation could spiral further into blame and recrimination, the door opened quietly, and a distinguished man entered. Dressed in a well-cut suit with an air of quiet authority, he carried an envelope in his hand as if it contained secrets that could shatter or redeem lives. "Good morning," he said with calm assurance, his voice resonating in the still room. "My name is Mr. Thompson. I believe I can shed some light on matters that have been misunderstood." A hush fell over the room. All eyes turned to him as he approached the table with deliberate, measured steps. He paused for a moment, looking directly at Marcus, whose expression remained guarded yet curious. "I have come on behalf of Mr. Marcus Allen," Mr. Thompson continued, "to clarify a matter of great importance that has been hidden for far too long." There was a pause, a pregnant silence where time seemed to stretch. Mr. Thompson slowly unfolded the envelope and pulled out a set of documents, placing them carefully on the table. Marcus, he said, his tone both respectful and firm, what you have experienced is not a mere accident of fate. It is connected to a legacy, a heritage that you were born into but chose to leave behind for your own safety. These documents prove that you are the rightful heir to a fortune amassed over generations, a fortune that has been concealed to protect you from the very forces that once threatened your family. The room exploded with murmurs and disbelief. Marcus's eyes widened ever so slightly, and even Amelia leaned forward, compelled by the gravity of this unexpected revelation. Mr. Harris's face turned ashen as he struggled to reconcile the image of the quiet, reserved passenger he had seen with the notion of immense wealth and hidden power. Marcus finally spoke, his voice steady despite the surge of emotions swirling inside him. I have always known there was something different about me, something I couldn't quite put into words, he said quietly, addressing both the room and the many questions that now filled its corners. For years, I lived in shadows, trying to understand the world without the burden of wealth, to know if I could be treated as just another person. I did not ask for special treatment. I only asked to be seen, to be respected for who I am, not for what I might own. His words resonated like a soft, persistent drumbeat in the silence that followed. Mr. Thompson nodded in agreement, adding, "It was a conscious choice by your family. They wish for you to experience life as it truly is, raw, unfiltered, and sometimes painfully unjust. They hoped that by living a humble life, you would come to understand the real value of humanity beyond material wealth. But now, the time has come for the truth to be known." Amelia's eyes glistened with tears as she absorbed every word. The conflict that had begun with a simple act of denied service had grown into something far larger, a reckoning with the past, with prejudice, and with the choices that shape our lives. "I am so sorry," she whispered, more to herself than to anyone else. "I have spent so many years judging and acting without truly understanding the whole story. Today, I see that my actions were influenced by biases I never intended to let control me." Mr. Harris, who had been silent until now, found his voice wavering as he addressed the gathering. "We all have a duty to treat every passenger with the utmost respect. I cannot express how deeply sorry I am that our system, and indeed our own actions, contributed to your pain, Mr. Allen. We were wrong, and we must learn from this." His tone was sincere, though laced with regret over the missed opportunity to recognize the extraordinary in the midst of the ordinary. Marcus looked around the room, his gaze meeting each person's in turn. "This isn't just about one mistake or one misunderstanding," he said softly. "It's about a system built on assumptions and prejudices. I stand before you not to claim sympathy for the injustices I have suffered, but to ask that we all learn from this. Let my story be a reminder that wealth is not measured by money, but by the kindness we show to one another." As the discussion unfolded, Mr. Thompson continued to explain the details that had been hidden away for so long. Marcus's family had long been targets of envy and malice. To protect him, they arranged for his identity to remain a secret. In doing so, they hoped that he would develop his own sense of worth, independent of the fortune that awaited him. But in our world, secrets have a way of surfacing, especially when injustice calls for attention. His words were measured and deliberate, each one carving a path through the layers of misunderstanding that had built up over time. The room fell into deep reflection. A sense of collective responsibility began to replace the earlier tension. Amelia, with a voice choked by emotion, said, "I have spent my career trying to uphold the standards of service, but I now see that I allowed my own fears and preconceptions to cloud my judgment. I can only ask for forgiveness and promise that I will work to change to ensure that no one else suffers in silence." Her eyes searched Marcus's, seeking a sign of absolution, and in that moment he offered a small, understanding smile. Outside the meeting room, the atmosphere at the airport was charged with a similar energy. News of the revelations had already begun to ripple through the corridors, and press conference was quickly arranged to address the incident publicly. Under the bright lights of a hastily assembled press area, reporters gathered, their questions a mix of curiosity and indignation. Marcus, flanked by Mr. Thompson and a visibly remorseful Amelia, took the stage with a quiet dignity that belied the storm of emotions beneath. One reporter, her voice trembling with a mix of skepticism and hope, asked, "Mr. Allen, can you confirm the truth behind these documents? Is it really true that you are the heir to such an enormous fortune and that your family intentionally hid this from the world?" Marcus paused, his eyes reflecting a lifetime of silent struggles before he answered. Yes, it is true. I was born into wealth, a legacy that was meant to shield me from a dangerous world. But I chose to live as I did because I wanted to know if I could be valued for who I am, not just what I possess. I have learned that the true measure of a person lies in their character, their empathy, and the love they show to others. The words, spoken in simple yet profound English, resonated with everyone present. A murmur of understanding swept through the crowd as the reporters scribbled notes and exchanged glances. Another voice, steadier this time, followed up. What do you hope people will take away from your experience? Marcus's reply was thoughtful and clear. I hope that my story reminds us all that prejudice and injustice often hide behind the most ordinary faces. I want to challenge each one of you to look beyond appearances, to treat every person with kindness and respect. And I hope that by sharing my truth, we can build a world where empathy triumphs over prejudice. The press conference marked a turning point. As the day wore on, discussions sprang up not only among the staff and management of the airline, but also in the wider community. Policies were re-examined, training programs were revised, and there was a growing commitment to confronting the biases that had allowed such an incident to occur. Amelia and her colleague Sophie began leading sessions that encouraged staff to examine their own assumptions, to understand the power of every small act of kindness, and to appreciate the rich tapestry of human experience that passed through their hands every day. In the quiet moments that followed the public revelations, Marcus found himself alone in a modest lounge area. The soft murmur of evening travelers provided a gentle backdrop as he sat in reflection. He carefully looked at the documents that had once been hidden away, now a testament to a legacy he had chosen to embrace on his own terms. He recalled the countless days of silent endurance, the subtle microaggressions, and the unspoken pain that had fueled his journey. Yet in that quiet space, he also felt a renewed sense of purpose, a call to show that strength is not measured by wealth, but by the courage to rise above injustice. Amelia, too, spent time in reflection. Walking slowly through the now quiet corridors of the terminal, she replayed the events in her mind. Every word of apology, every moment of hesitation, and every silent tear was a reminder of the cost of ignorance. I must change, she repeated softly to herself. Not just for me, but for every person who has ever been judged unfairly. The weight of responsibility on her shoulders felt lighter now, replaced by a resolve to mend what had been broken and to help rebuild trust where it had been lost. As dusk settled and the airport lights bathed the terminal in a gentle glow, Marcus and Amelia found themselves together once more by a large window overlooking the runway. Outside, planes took off and landed in a steady rhythm, a symbol of the continuous cycle of arrivals and departures, a reminder that every ending can be a new beginning. Amelia looked at Marcus with eyes that held both sorrow and hope. I am truly sorry, Marcus, she said, her voice trembling. Today you have shown me that every person's story matters. I will work every day to honor that truth. Marcus met her gaze with a soft smile. No harm was done if it led us to this moment, he replied, his voice carrying the quiet strength of someone who had weathered many storms. Sometimes the darkest moments are the ones that illuminate the path forward. I am not defined by the hardships I have endured, but by the choices I make now, to forgive, to understand, and to build a future that is kinder. In that quiet exchange, the true meaning of the day began to crystallize. It was a moment of reckoning and redemption, where the pain of the past gave way to the promise of transformation. The incident that had once divided people now united them in a shared commitment to change. Every person in that room, managers, staff, and even the skeptical onlookers, felt the stirrings of a new era, one in which the worth of a person was measured not by wealth or appearance, but by the depth of their compassion. The story of Marcus's hidden legacy spread far beyond the walls of the airport. Community leaders, inspired by his courage, began to speak out against the everyday injustices that had long been ignored. Local schools organized discussions on empathy and respect, urging students to look beyond stereotypes and to see the beauty in every individual. Social media buzzed with messages of hope and solidarity as people from all walks of life shared their own stories of overcoming prejudice and embracing their true selves. In the days that followed, Amelia and her colleagues spearheaded a series of reforms within the airline. New training programs were introduced to help staff recognize and overcome their biases, ensuring that every passenger would be treated with the dignity they deserved. Meetings were held not to assign blame, but to learn and grow from the painful lessons of the past. Even Mr. Harris, whose initial reaction had been one of stern reprimand, became a vocal advocate for change, using his position to push for policies that celebrated diversity and compassion. One evening, as the terminal grew quiet and the final flights prepared to depart, Marcus found himself sitting on a bench near the large windows that offered a view of the star-studded sky. The cool night air carried with it a sense of renewal, a reminder that every end was merely the precursor to a new beginning. He thought back on the long journey that had led him to this moment, the struggles, the moments of isolation, and now the unexpected revelation of his true heritage. It's all part of a larger story, he whispered to himself, one that is not defined by money or status, but by the human spirit. In that reflective silence, the message became clear. The strength to overcome prejudice lies within each of us. The true fortune in life is found not in the weight of gold or the size of a bank account, but in the compassion we extend to one another, in the willingness to acknowledge our shared humanity, even when the world seems intent on dividing us. Marcus's journey had taken him from quiet endurance to a moment of profound transformation, a reminder that every act of kindness, no matter how small, can spark change. For those of us listening to this story, let it be a call to examine our own lives. Imagine if you were in Marcus's shoes, facing the unyielding judgment of a society quick to label you, yet standing firm in the quiet dignity of your own truth. Consider the moments when you may have overlooked the silent pain in someone's eyes, the subtle gestures that spoke of a deeper struggle. In each of us lies the power to choose empathy over indifference, to choose understanding over prejudice. As the night deepened and the airport slowly emptied, a sense of hope lingered in the air. A hope born from a knowledge that even the smallest act of kindness can alter the course of many lives. The legacy of this day was not just the unveiling of a hidden fortune, but the affirmation that every individual, regardless of their past or their appearance, carries within them a light capable of dispelling even the deepest darkness. In the days ahead, when you think of Marcus's journey, let it remind you to look beyond what is visible. Ask yourself, how can I show more kindness? How can I challenge my own assumptions? And most importantly, how can I help create a world where every person is valued for who they truly are? The story of Marcus and Amelia is not a closed chapter. It is an invitation to continue the conversation, to share your thoughts, and to act with compassion in every encounter. Let this be our shared call to action. In every conversation you have, in every decision you make, remember that empathy and understanding are the true measures of our worth. When you see someone who seems different, take a moment to learn their story. When you encounter injustice, speak up. And when you feel overwhelmed by the challenges of a divided world, remember that even a single act of kindness can spark a revolution of change. As the final announcements echoed softly through the terminal and the lights dimmed over the quiet runways, the day's events settled into memory, a memory that would inspire change not only within these walls, but far beyond. The story of a denied service, a hidden fortune, and the courage to face one's own prejudices now stood as a testament to the transformative power of truth and compassion. In the end, we are all on a journey where every challenge is an opportunity to grow, where every setback can lead to a deeper understanding of ourselves and the world around us. Marcus's revelation was not merely a twist of fate, but a reminder that sometimes the most extraordinary truths are hidden beneath layers of silence and humility. And as we move forward, let us honor that truth by treating one another with the care and respect that every human being deserves. Share this story, let its message echo in your hearts, and join the movement toward a future where every person is seen, heard, and valued. For in the quiet dignity of every individual lies the power to change the world, one act of kindness at a time.